Hi, I'm Ross Newman and you're watching Natural Aesthetics, the YouTube channel dedicated to drug-free bodybuilding. In this video, I'm going to be talking about shoulder development, how to build bigger shoulders as a natural. So this was the lead topic in the poll that I ran last week. For those of you that don't know, the poll section is in the community tab of my YouTube channel. So check on that on a weekly basis because I'll be doing polls each week. And if you want to listen to me talk about a particular topic, then vote on it, and the topic with the most votes will be a video on the following week. Okay, so shoulder development for naturals. Now, this is something I get asked about quite a lot, actually. You know, how to get that kind of capped 3D look to the muscles. Truth be told, it's extremely difficult for a natural to achieve that. I've been training for over 10 years and I still haven't got that capped look to the shoulders. And I think there's a big misconception about kind of what's possible within 2 to 3 years as a natural. And we're always seeing these images of these people, IFBB competitors, Instagram models, physique competitors that are taking anabolic steroids and have that kind of rounded look. It's extremely difficult for a natural to achieve that. You'll have a better chance of kind of matching some of those athletes in the leg department, maybe the pecs, maybe the arms, maybe the back. But the shoulders especially very, very difficult because those areas here, traps, shoulders and upper chest, are very, very sensitive to anabolic steroids and will grow very, very quickly and create that kind of bulbous, 3D pop. So for a natural to achieve that, it's highly unlikely to get those big rounded delts. So something like this would be, I'd say, almost impossible. It's just not going to happen. That being said, you can still have fantastic shoulders as a natural, especially when you're lean. They look really, really impressive, really grainy and sort of fibrous from the backs and sides as well. Very, very impressive. And in my opinion, a top natural, their shoulder development will look better, in my opinion, than a current IFBB Pro. For whatever reason, they're playing the size game, they're using too many steroids, they're using synthetic oils. There's just no detail on the muscle. There's no fibrous kind of feathering. There's no separation between the actual heads of the shoulder. It just doesn't look as good as it used to, and it doesn't look as good, in my opinion, as a top natural. Albeit it's downsized and it's smaller, but there's certainly more detail. It just looks more grainy and kind of feathering and fibrous. So, first and foremost, when you're looking at your shoulder training, you really need to look at your form. This is a big problem that I see in the gym on a very regular basis, and that's people not using proper form, especially on the pressing movements and the side isolations. So the pressing movements, really with shoulders, you're going to be humbled by the weight you use, especially if you're going closer to vertical. There's no way you can lift anywhere near to what you'd press on the flat press for the chest, and I think people go into the gym and they don't want to be seen pressing small weights, so they'll reduce the range of motion, go down, halfway, or push the bench back to an almost inclined chest position, which, it is fairly good on some training blocks to do this, but not all the time. You want to be, vertical for some of them, because then you're completely on the shoulders. There's no chest really whatsoever. But you're going to be humbled by the weight you use. At the moment, I'm doing vertical press all the way down. I'm only using 34, 35 kilos, and, it feels pretty heavy. So, first and foremost, don't go into the gym and try and lift weights that are too heavy and therefore reduce the range of motion. Increased range of motion is always better. Creates more stimulus on the muscles. And yes, there can be times when you can make use of partial reps, but first and foremost, you want to get the basics right and, work on progressive overload, so increase the amount of weight and the reps at a particular weight that you're doing with full range of motion, especially on the dumbbell presses, because it's something I see every day in the gym. People half-assing the dumbbell presses or machine presses. Secondly, the lateral raise form is always really, really naff. It needs to be mastered. Sure, your isolation movements are done properly. You're actually taxing the muscles that you want to tax, and that same goes for front raises and bent over raises with the cables or dumbbells. It's essential to get that right. Make sure your range of motion on the presses are good enough, and I would say learn the overhead press either with dumbbells or barbell. Even if you don't use it much going forwards, it's just a good exercise to learn, carries over very well to all of your other pressing movements, teaches good movement habits, increases your mobility, and it's just a really good exercise to get practicing and master. I've seen it all too often, people pressing heavy weights when they're sitting down, but they can't press for shit above the head when they're standing up because they haven't got the torso rigidity all the mobility in the shoulder. So that's a big one as well to practice. Okay, so now we've spoken about form. That's up to scratch, it's good enough. Now we need to maybe manipulate certain variables within your training program. So how many times are you training shoulders per week? How hard are you training shoulders? How many sets are you doing overall per session and then per week for your shoulder training? First and foremost, you have to track what you're doing in the gym. If you're not tracking, then you can't adjust because you don't know what's working and what's not working. So you need to be tracking the amount of work you're doing, how hard it is, the weights you're lifting, the reps you're doing at that weight, how many sets, etc. It's vital. Without that, it's very, very hard to progress. So I'd recommend any weak part that you got, if you want to build your shoulders up, you need to be adding frequency of sessions. I'd go for 2. You don't have to do it all the time, but maybe add 2 sessions for shoulders per week for like an 8-week training cycle. So it's more than what you've already been doing. If you're not happy with your progress, you're only training once per week, then add 2 sessions. It's pretty simple. Just do more. How often are you going to failure? If you're not really reaching that kind of level of intensity that you could do, then maybe that's something you need to look at also. Maybe over that 8-week period, work up to nearly every set to failure at the end of that training protocol. Don't go too hard at the beginning. Give yourself a few weeks to progressively increase the amount of sets you're doing to near or at failure. That's another way of doing it. And add in sets per week, and that's really easy to do when you increase the frequency. If you're doing 8 sets per week at the moment, your shoulders aren't really growing, then try for 12 to 16 sets and see what happens. Track your progress. Take pictures of yourself. Are they improving with that extra volume? Prepare a program, change what you're doing at the moment if it's not working, give yourself like an 8-week training block and play around with those variables. For myself, I would recommend 2 sessions per week if it's something you want to bring up. You don't have to do all the time. You can certainly benefit if you're only doing once at the moment to then going on to 2 sessions. Okay, so something else we need to consider is progressive overload. I would pick an exercise, a compound movement, so some type of heavy press, be it a barbell overhead press, standing or seating, dumbbell overhead press, standing or seated, some kind of machine press that you feel in the shoulders, it feels comfortable for you, you're able to load up fairly heavy and get a good stimulus in the shoulders. Don't pick a machine that doesn't feel good. So pick a movement that you enjoy and you can commit to for an 8-week period or so, and then just work on progressive overload. Try and add some mini plates or add a 1.25 every time you add 2 reps. You've got to stagger it. So if you start off with 6 reps on the first week, gun for that 7 rep set the weeks after. Once you hit 8 reps, then put it up 1.25 and just kind of chase your tail that way over an 8-week period, and you will progress. And if you progress on your compound lifts, it will drag all of the isolations up. So after your compound lift, you can maybe do 5 sets on that, maybe 1 or 2 real hard sets, and then a few back off sets at slightly lower intensities just to kind of fill out the volume a little bit. Or you could just do basic 5 times 5. Look up something like starting strength and apply it to your shoulder pressing. Utilize that method, and then supplement that with your isolations. So side raises, some front raises, maybe some lighter machine press, maybe some kettlebell press as well. I like kettlebell press because the range of motion is very, very good. With a kettlebell press, you're able to start from a lower position. Dumbbell press, you're only ever going to go as low as this. Where a kettlebell press, you can go down an extra 2 inches. And the neck press is a really, really good exercise as well. Again, you're going to be humbled by the amount of weight you use, but it's an extremely effective way of taxing the shoulders. And as long as you've got the mobility to be able to perform the exercise safely, and I don't see it poses any more risk than any other exercise. It's just not in fashion. It's as simple as that. The fitness industry is all about fashion. Certain exercises, certain programs will be in fashion. The other stuff isn't in fashion, but it doesn't mean it's not beneficial. So behind the neck press, really, really good exercise. Will really hit the shoulders hard and add some mass to them if you, again, do enough work with good form, full range of motion, and maybe some dumbbell upright rows as well. A good alternative to the lateral raise. With a dumbbell upright row, you can go a little bit heavier as well, loads the shoulder to a greater degree. Yes, it uses a little bit more traps, but can be a nice alternative to the lateral raises. So take-home points, make sure your range of motion is good. Make sure your form is on point. Don't sacrifice form for your ego, lifting too heavy. Tweak the verticality of your dumbbell machine pressing. Make sure you're doing some work that's vertical, and you're going to be humbled by the weight on that, but it will hit the shoulders very, very hard. Learn the overhead press, either with dumbbells or barbell. Really good movement to practice, and teaches good habits, teaches good movement patterns, increases your flexibility, stuff like that. Pick a compound that you can use for progressive overload, and work on that. Maybe look up starting strength and apply that kind of protocol to your compound, 5 sets of 5, or go for one heavy set and then maybe 3 or 4 back off sets at slightly less weight to fill out the volume. Once you can do a couple of reps on that weight that you've been doing, then maybe go up 1.25k or whatever it is you do, or use mini plates maybe to increase the weight each week. There are many different ways of going about doing this. Tweak your volume, frequency and intensity. Maybe do more sets at a higher intensity, getting closer to failure than you were before. Maybe do 2 shoulder sessions per week instead of 1. Maybe do 20 sets on your shoulders instead of 10. The world's your oyster really in terms of how you manipulate variables. And give behind the neck press a go, as long as your form is good. Some dumbbell upright rows, and you'll find that if you commit to that for an 8-week period without changing the exercise selection too much, you'll see some progress if you bear those principles in mind. So hope you enjoyed the video, guys. If you did, then please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to see more true natural bodybuilding content. Stay strong.